live stream going. Okay. My name's Moshe, and I'm coming to you from Israel in the Galilee. And what is today? No, I think it's the 20th. And it's 7:45 in the morning. And our weather is 66 now, high of 83, tomorrow 85, then 84, 81, 78. So our heat wave is about to go away. It was pretty cold yesterday. Check this thing, okay. All right, so today we're going to talk about BRICS and the damage to the US dollar. We're going to talk about BRICS and gold. We're going to talk about the value of gold, what the investment bankers are saying it's going to be, which is they're usually very wrong. They don't understand prophecy. We're going to talk about Trump and the mayor of New York City. They're having a meeting tomorrow at the White House. And I'm rather sure Trump's going to read him the riot act, and I'm also rather sure he's going to ignore it. And I'm also rather sure Trump will take action against him because it's a very safe thing to take action against the mayor. The guy can't do anything to Trump, you know. They'll run him up the flagpole for crimes, sedition, treason, all sorts of things. You'll see. There's very few, as I read you yesterday, there's about 3 other mayors that are Muslims in the United States. That's it. And there's no governors. There's a couple, 2 or 3 police chiefs and sheriffs. It's precious little. I mean, they're not set up to do much right now. The sleeper agents are the problem. Okay. And we'll talk about the economy and the value of the US dollar and where it's headed and what's going on. And we'll talk about Israel with Trump and his crazy Gaza plan and Netanyahu bringing down more curses on the people of Israel, making their life harder and more miserable, which is what he thrives on doing to stop Aliyah. Before we had this curse on Israel, people in Israel used to promote Aliyah. They wanted people to come move here. They were told things that they don't get told anymore, like, oh, you know, if we have so many million people, we could make our own cars here. Well, why would Netanyahu never want us to make our own cars here? Because taxes to cars 100%, sometimes 150%. That's an import tax. So if they were made here, he can't do it. Now, on top of that, you have a 18% VAT tax. On top of that, now the 18% VAT tax would apply to cars made here, but he would lose, 50%. And do I think he's corrupt? Yeah. We caught him a few years ago with the submarine thing. He bought submarines. He used his cousin, who doesn't live in Israel, as a lawyer, to broker the deal and got a $25 million, I believe it was $25 million commission. That's how you could imagine. That's just one deal. Imagine the 30 or 40 of those that never got caught. Okay. Imagine that. One deal. And of course, the money came back. How about that? He's horrible. A lot of people feel he's complicit on October 7th. I'm one of them. And there must be over 1 million people in Israel that feel that way. The Supreme Court now wants to know why they never really did a decent investigation on October 7th. That was in the headlines today. He's such garbage, this guy. And the horrible thing is the people in Israel don't even know what he's doing. And that's the same thing in America and England and Germany and Japan. People don't know. I couldn't give you the name of one country where the people know what's going on. Not a single country. I don't think it exists. People just don't know. It's sad, isn't it? The dumb down has taken hold. Okay, so let me jump into our live stream and put up with YouTube's horrible new layout. Which is not they don't ask you, they just do things, which is not they don't ask you, they just do things. I'm doing pretty good today. Okay, I'm going to put a post up in the chat, which is only going to be a few seconds. I'm doing pretty good today. Okay, I'm going to put a post up in the chat, which is only going to be a few seconds. All right, let's get this going. Okay, looks like I got that all squared away. Being a Bible believing site, Old and New Testament. Whoops, I didn't shut this. Old and New Testament will we'll do some praise. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 Okay. So Trump is going to be meeting with this, what's his name, Mandani, or whatever the heck the character is, the new mayor-elect of New York City, the Muslim guy, and Trump's going to read him the Riot Act, okay? This guy is saying that he's not going to pay attention to federal law anymore, just international law. So basically, he's succeeding from the United States. He's going to do a lot of handouts to Muslims as much as he can. Trump will cut his funding. The problem is other countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Iran, who knows, China. could give him money to continue those programs, and I don't know if Trump could stop that. Trump could try. The money would go to funding, soup kitchens, hotels, immigrants. The idea would be to bring in as many Muslims as he could into New York City, preferably the illegal ones, house them there, and attempt to prevent the federal authorities from working in New York City, which is succession. Okay. Abraham Lincoln couldn't come into Georgia and enforce his laws during the Civil War. They wouldn't pay attention, Now, the people from New York City never voted on withdrawing from the United States. Right. There is a procedure called a recall. Okay, it needs to be funded in New York. It would be, you're probably looking at $50, $100 million or 200, very expensive. They have to get a small percentage of the voters that voted in the election, probably about 3%. It could be up to 7%. It's usually in that range. To sign a petition stating they want to have another election. If they get that, percentage of people signing a petition with their, driver's license, social security, stuff like that on there. There becomes a vote at the next election. Well, they could accelerate and schedule it just on its own election for the people to vote on getting rid of this guy, and then they would probably combine it with voting for a new candidate. It usually takes time, although they could step it up probably a year, 9 months, a year. But they voted him in once, they might vote him in again. So they just would come up with a vote not to have a new election. So it may prove futile. Trump can arrest him if he does bad things. If he interferes with the federal agents doing their job and enforcing the laws, I think he could be arrested. And that solves the bulk of the problem. His underlings wouldn't have authority, and they would probably have to schedule an immediate election. There's going to be all kinds of court cases, and Trump's got the Justice Department. Now, there's a lot of good lawyers that work for these big firms that if they're senior partners and stuff, they're going to be Satan bots, okay? And they're going to make, 1 or 2 million a year all the way to 25 million a year. depending on the firm and what percentage they get as a partner, you know. If they're like a senior managing partner, their salary could be 3 or 4 million a year, and then they get a big piece of the action, so they could walk away with millions every year. They don't get there without being highly effective lawyers. Okay. Um, Now, a lot of people work at law firms, work as lawyers for the United States government to learn how to do these things. Okay. So if you work for the Securities Exchange Commission as a lawyer, even for 2 years or 3 years, big law firms that handle security cases are going to be very interested in hiring you. But if you work there for 5 years or 7 years, you know, you might find yourself facing a $1 or $2 million enlistment bonus and, a salary of, $40,000, $50,000 a month starting out, stuff like that. Because they're going to charge, they're going to bill you out at $1,000, $1,200 an hour. When the money comes back, okay? Because up to date what the Securities Exchange Commission does, how they work, how they handle cases, how they can do that, what they're good at, what they're bad at, and all this stuff, right? And you also may even know certain of the lawyers individually, although maybe not, because they're all over the country. And this would go on with lawyers for Food and Drug Administration, justice for criminal, antitrust, things like that. And commerce has lawyers. FAA has lawyers. The FTC has lawyers. Federal Trade Commission. So they work in these various agencies, and then they get picked up by law firms. Now, the other thing that happens is a lot of these people don't leave the job. They're not Satan bots. They're not going to be on a fast track to partnership. No one's going to offer them a partnership. Okay? And they don't know the Satan bot thing, but if they can 40,000 a year, 150, and at as lawyer after 7, 8, 9 years in the federal government, and then they get overtime. It builds up. They get very good vacations, long vacations, and they don't have the stress. Not, hey, this is a very important client to the firm. They spend $4 or $5 million a year here every year. We got to make sure they come out on this one. Okay. You're probably getting precious little of, well, you got to stay late into this motion, and in the office of the Federal Trade Commission, legal department, that's not going to be highly probable and likely. It might happen occasionally. You basically don't care. You win or you don't win. You're not a politician, and you got civil service protection, and you're going to do your job. You're going to try hard, and you're not going to kill yourself. And when you go home Friday and you go fishing, you go to a basketball game, or you go wine tasting, or whatever you're going to do, you don't care about the job. You turn it off. You go home Tuesday night, click, you turn it off. That's one of the greatest things about government work is you just turn it off. Okay? the people in the big law firms don't turn it off. I remember many years ago, I had a friend in Berkeley, and I was at, she had a kid, and this was many years ago. I was single, and there was a party, a birthday party, and she asked me to go with her over there. She didn't want to go by herself, so I went with her. And she had a lot of friends that were highly placed. They were professors, doctors, and different things. So she had this one, was the father of the kid with the party, was a lawyer. I won't forget this. It really stuck with me. So it was I think a day or a Sunday we went over there, and there was 20 people in the house. Probably had quite a nice house, and a very friendly fellow. And he was walking around in the house, watching the party, reading a law book. Okay, holding the book, walking around, trying to be with the party and read the book at the same time. Now he was billing the client probably back then $200-300 an hour or something like that. But that's what life is like in the big law firm, and they go to work, and they're working at night. Common, they got more business than they know. Always, their clients are always suing, getting sued, trying to do something. You know, they're always doing it. Um, and for about 5 to 10 years, say 7 years, going to be staying late in the office several days a week. A lot of them would go jogging at lunch hour. So in other words, they have themselves a salad or something um, that they brought, or they had delivered, maybe a Caesar salad with chicken in it or something. You know, I don't know. And then they have places in the office there they can change. So they change into the ring, and they go down, and they go for a half-hour run on their lunch break, right? Then they come back and they have showers and steam rooms in these law firms and jacuzzis, I think. It depends on the firm, stuff like that. So they come back, they jump into the shower, take a and get dressed, go back to their office, and go back to work and eat their salad and their lunch, right? Then comes the evening. Now, some of them might take a break like at 5 o'clock, and but usually they'll do it at lunch, and they give in San Francisco, they'll have a list of maybe 6 or 8 places that have good dinners they can deliver. And the dinner's going to probably be $40. They're not going to get McDonald's. They don't want them eating garbage. They'll get really good food. Maybe it's $50-60. They're probably not going to get a steak, or they might get sushi. They might get, who knows. And they're going to eat in the office while they're working. Okay, and then they go home. Maybe 8 o'clock, 9, 11. And the next morning, where do they go? Well, they might come into the office early if they have to and go to court. The lawyers try to keep their offices not far from the courts. So they go to court, okay? They take a taxi, or they walk, or they take an e-bike, or whatever they're going to do, and they go to court. And they got motions to file, motions to answer. They got hearings, and they bounce around. They might be in the courthouse doing different things for 3-4 hours. And then usually by lunch, they're out, the judges close down. It gets quieter in the courtroom, in the courts. And now I'm not talking about them having a trial. They clear out, they go back to their office, and they start working. Now, if you want to put in something like 7 years of this, and they like you, they'll make you a junior partner. And then the amount of hours that you have to stay late probably goes down by at least half, maybe 70%. You can only be staying late on real serious emergencies where it was very complicated. Okay? Not much at all. Maybe once a week. Twice would be a lot. And you put in a few years, 3, 4, 5 years as a junior partner, then you're into senior partner. That's pretty much the end of work. And then you got different kinds of lawyers. You got lawyers that are good at interviewing clients and sucking the clients in. You got lawyers that are rainmakers. You're good at going to parties and having a sailboat and taking people out and, whatever you're doing. And socializing, and you're bringing clients in. That's the rainmaker. Now, the rainmaker's the one that's going to go to the top of the class quicker than anybody else because he's bringing the money in. The talent can always hire. If you got the clients, you can get the talent. They're worried about getting the clients. Now, when they get the clients, they got to do well for the clients. They got to protect their reputation. So they need really good lawyers. They need lawyers that are good at negotiation and arbitration. Some lawyers are very good at that. Other lawyers are trial lawyers, litigators, and very good at trial. Okay? So you go like now, you got some lawyers that are really, really good at certain things, like medical malpractice firms make a lot of money because the doctor is getting millions of dollars. These are big lawsuits, and they'll spend big money on it. So the lawyers for for the insurance company are basically hiring litigators around the country as the need comes, and it's their job to know who the good law firms are in different cities. So they got, they know who a good lawyer is in Miami, right? And they got to go to Atlanta or Nashville for a case, something like that. Well, they'll ask them for a referral, and they find out who the good lawyers are, and they give them the cases, and then they have lawyers in the insurance company that supervise these things and read all the motions and the filings and the pleadings and all that stuff, and they report to the executives about what's really going on in the case. So it's very difficult for these law firms to, do a bull story on the lawyer working for the insurance company. He knows exactly how these cases are supposed to progress. You're not fooling him. Okay? And if he sees things going south, he's going to get mad. He's going to fly in for a meeting. If it doesn't correct, he's going to fire the law firm. They don't do their own cases. So if you were, let's say, before you went to law school, you were a registered nurse, and then you became a nurse practitioner or something like that, right? And you knew a lot about operating rooms, procedures, and medical and diagnostics, or the emergency room, or you knew, and then you decided to be a lawyer because you wanted to make money, and you get out of law school. Let's say you didn't get out of Harvard or Stanford, you came out of the middle of the road law school, like a state university or something like that, like Berkeley has a law school, Florida State has the law school, something like that, and you know, decent grades, you were middle of the class or something like that. But you were working for a few years as a nurse practitioner. Would they quit? Yeah, because you take regular lawyers, they don't understand the medical. They don't understand what was going on. They don't understand what the doctor was trying to do. They don't understand what the doctor did wrong. Okay? They would have no way of knowing that. They don't learn that in law school. So this particular person that was a nurse practitioner is current, relatively speaking, understands what's going on. So they're going to get a big amount of money, and they're going to be able to, walk right in, and the law firm's going to have to educate them about the practice of malpractice law, but this and that. So anyway, I digress. All right. So Trump is going to read the Riot Act to this guy in New York, and he's going to say, go fly a kite, because nobody respects Trump that's a Muslim anymore. That's my opinion on the international scene. So I don't think he's going to sit there and tell Trump, don't worry, I'm not doing any of that. Relax. No, he can't, because this whole ticket is, no, we're not having Homeland Security. We're going to block them. We don't want this. We don't, and then he wants to control the UN. He wants to enforce international law with these courts like the NYC. And America is not a party to. We never signed the agreement with them. So they have no authority in the United States, and he wants to reserve that. He wants to use their arrest warrants to arrest people that they want to arrest, like Netanyahu, to stop them from coming to the United Nations. See, Trump can't have that. So Trump has to tell the guy, if you do stuff like that, we're going to lock you up. Then the guy will say, well, you can try to lock me up and see what happens. And Trump will say what's going to happen. That's it. So we wait and watch for that one. Do I think it'll end badly? Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's not going to submit to Trump. Don't even go there. Okay? The thing with Gaza is starting to get worse and worse. The Hamas in Gaza is starting to make more moaning and groaning about, we reject this thing that the UN did. Well, it's the UN. Saudi Arabia said, oh, we want to see a path to a Palestinian state, and they went along for it. Iran said, oh, we protest, and we don't like this, basically, and that was all they did. Nobody did anything. Qatar didn't do anything. Egypt didn't do anything. Turkey, nobody. So they were basically telling Gaza it's over. Why would they say that? Because it's over. That's why. And they got all these millions of people. It's just, as they see it, it's time to regroup and play again another day. I don't think they're going to take an active hand in disarming Gaza. Now, Trump seems to think so. Will Saudi send troops over there to disarm Hamas? Probably not, because the fear would be the Houthis would shoot missiles at their oil refinery, the Aramco refinery, which they did at least 2 times in recent years, and they get shut down for a while till they rebuild. So do I think that Saudi's going to be too? I don't think so. There's 8 or 10 countries pitching in. Yeah, then Saudi might say, okay, I'll pitch in. Will Jordan pitch in? I doubt it. Will the UAE? If Saudi does, probably the UAE. Will Kuwait? No. Will Bahrain or Qatar? Maybe Qatar. I don't know. Oman won't do anything. Egypt might. They might pitch in. Turkey's not allowed to pitch in. Now Trump is saying he's going to end the fighting in Sudan, the civil war, where they're killing the Christians and stuff like that. Okay. How? Give him money to. I don't know what he's going to do. Let's see what happens. So this whole thing with Gaza works if foreign countries want to send soldiers there. They would probably each need to send 2,000 or 3,000. Well, I don't know how many they want to build up. 25,000 or 5,000. Trump might be able to get by with 5,000 to 10,000 soldiers. So then you're looking at they're sending 1,000, 1,500 soldiers. Now you got to build a base for them. What base is? Maybe one in the south, one in the north to cut the drive time. But it's only 25 miles long, so we're kind of talking about, and let's see if we get it. I'm not so sure. Indonesia might kick in. Singapore might kick in. I don't know if he's going to take non-Muslims. See, non-Muslims are considered infidels, dogs, garbage. So I don't know if they'll do that. I don't know. Meanwhile, in New York City, they're getting ugly before this new mayor gets sworn in, which is January 1. They were protesting outside of a synagogue with some very ugly verbiage. I'll read you some of the stuff. It's really volatile. And there were Jews across the street from these protesters protesting the protests. So it got a little bit on the ugly side, and the police were there. They needed to be there. It was getting pretty warm, the protests. Okay, let's see if we can get into some details of that. Whoops. Let me get rid of this. Anti-Zionists, they're calling it, protesters heckle Jews and chant for an intifada outside a New York City synagogue. I believe this was yesterday. The protesters gathered outside the Park East Synagogue in Manhattan. Sounds like it was Park East Park. I don't know, where it is, but maybe by the park. I don't have any idea. I never heard of it. Okay, to protest an event by Nefesh B'Nefesh. Now, Nefesh B'Nefesh is an organization that promotes Aliyah to Israel. They don't want any messianics, okay? They really don't want anybody that has a grandparent that was Israeli or Jewish, and they aren't, and they don't really follow the law of return. They're just looking for Jews. Now, they were also really interested in practicing Jews. Okay? Now, that has different meanings. For instance, let's say you're 35 years old and you want to make Aliyah. and you got bar mitzvahed and you went to the Hebrew school for a couple of years, like to prepare for your bar mitzvah, then you never went back, and the rabbi's still around, and you got a letter from him and stuff, they would take you. If you are married and you were going to, even if you just went on the high holidays, they would take you. If you never got bar mitzvah, you never got married by a rabbi, and you were Jewish, then how are you going to prove it to them? Well, maybe your mom and dad went to the synagogue, and the rabbi knows you were their daughter or son, and he gives it. But he gives you the letter. But they're pretty particular. They're not looking to help people that are, you know, basically New Testament people, you know, or Messianic. They don't want to help them at all. But the regular Jews, they'll help. So they'll help get their paperwork. They tell them what you need. So the people assemble all their paperwork in America with the help of Nefesh B'Nefesh, and they complete a file. It's rather complicated today. They'll have all kinds of, you know, things they got to do, criminal records checks and health and all this stuff. So they get all this junk put together, right? And then what? They submit it to Nefesh B'Nefesh, and they agree that it's good. They send it to Israel. It gets reviewed in Israel, but not that deeply, because they know Nefesh B'Nefesh did a good job. And then they approve the Aliyah, and they process what's called a Tudat Sahut, a citizenship identity card for them, which they don't give to them. They take their picture and their fingerprint, and they make the card and keep it in Israel. And when a Nefesh B'Nefesh will organize an airplane load of these people and charter a plane, give them a free flight to Israel, and they'll help them with sending their furniture and belongings. They'll help them with, you know, getting where you're going to live and where you're going to go to Ulpan. And, you know, they even have Ulpans in America. They're not that great, but they're places you could go to learn Hebrew that they'll run for free. And you can go usually maybe 2-3 times a week for an hour and a half, and they give you homework. And if you do that, you know, for, let's say, 3 months or 6 months or however long you're processing, when you come to Israel, you're going to have a step up. You know, you're going to have a lot easier in life. So they were protesting Nefesh B'Nefesh. Okay, so now you know what Nefesh B'Nefesh is. Like I said, if one of your grandparents is Jewish and you can prove it to the satisfaction of the Orthodox rabbis, yeah, right, and you're not Jewish, you could still come. They won't make you a citizen, they'll make you a permanent resident. A permanent resident does generally not get a passport, and they can live here forever, and they could do anything that a citizen of Israel can do, except vote. Now, getting married in Israel, that is probably another thing they can't do, and adopting children in Israel is probably something else they can't do. So there's some caveats to it, you know. They also might not be eligible to get buried in a Jewish cemetery, so put them out on Boot Hill if they die and nobody buries them or something. You know, things like this. Okay. Could they buy a gun? Yes. Would they get drafted into the military? Generally they wouldn't get drafted. if they wanted to go in, they could go in. That would be most likely what would happen. But I'm not up to date on that for today. That's what it was. So outside there, the chance there is only one solution: Intifada revolution. No peace on stolen land. So now they're saying that we stole our land. Very nice. And we don't want no two states. We want 48. I don't quite understand. 1948. Oh, they wanted to go back to 1948, before Israel was a state, I guess. Palestine is Arab. They chant in Arabic. One woman holds a sign that says Zionism is a death cult. As if on October 7th, Netanyahu told the Israelis to sneak into Gaza. For every hostage you bring back, we'll give you $1,000. And we're giving you a manual in Hebrew that'll tell you how to talk to the Arabs in Arabic. I'll have things like you can tell women, take your pants off and stuff, which is what the Arabs did, by the way. So you could rape them. Yeah, like we did that. No, they did that. But they want us to forget. One woman shouts, "You F Jewish P," at Jews walking past. Another shouts, "You're a effing rapist and racist." The two worst things in the world, F world, at a man with Israeli flag. Yeah, they gave the people on October 7th manuals that told them how to phraseology for in Hebrew. And one of the things they told them was how to tell the women to take their pants off so they could rape. We have the books. So it's the same thing. Whatever they say we did, they did. Typically. Jewish counter protesters gathered across from them in front of the entrance to the synagogue. Police and metal barricades separated the two sides. Wow, they put barricades out of metal. The Jewish group shouts, "F Hamas, you're cowards, and you're protesting at a synagogue." I'd say, "You're 35 years old and want to make all the, and you got oh no, this is something else. So this was a pretty serious situation. And it's just beginning. The guy hasn't even begun being mayor. When he becomes being the mayor, oh my gosh, it's going to get horrible over there. Now, what the people in the world, just like I tell you, the people in Israel don't understand what Netanyahu is doing to them in the fullness, most of them. And it's sad. And people around are dumb, okay? They're dumbed down. Like around the year 1890, an eighth grader would know more probably than somebody that just graduated high school. Some of them went 4 years more education. People going to college today, they're barely literate. I mean, um, you got to go back to the days of Hitler. And it was, a guy who said something very informative. He said, first they came for the Jews who did nothing. Then they came for the communists who did nothing. They came for the gypsies who did nothing. They came for the gay people who did nothing. Then they came for us. Okay, so this is the problem that people don't understand. Like that woman from Israel was a hostage. She said she concealed from Hamas that she was a lesbian. And she was speaking to Queers for Palestine, a group that supports the Palestinians. And she was saying, while you're, their friend and you support them, they don't support you. And she was explaining to them that they throw you off a roof head first for being gay. And these people don't know any better. It's crazy. They say first the Saturday people, that's Israel. They say next the Sunday people, that's the Christians and the Catholics. The Hindus know, okay? They got a type of Hindus that protect the people of India from the Muslims. They grow their hair long. What do they call them? A Sikh Hindu or something like that. I don't know. They carry a edged weapon as a weapon with them all the time. They conceal it. It's part of their religion to use it to protect the people of India from Muslims. They understand. They really understand. They practice martial arts. They have really good martial arts. I've seen it. It's not the junk you get at karate school or jujitsu school or, taekwondo or kendo. It's real martial arts for fighting. And they use weapons. They're good. I've watched them. They're good. Now, when you go, what they do, you go to, your taekwondo and all of that. They'll have you come, like 3 times a week for an hour and a half, 2 hours. After about 3 years, you make black. Do you really know how to fight? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What do you know? You know the katas, you know how to do the moves they want you to move, promote you up with the belt. If you go long enough, will you know how to fight? Maybe. What they teach you predominantly is stupid block, okay? Now, it starts with things like this, and that. And then if you go to probably third, fourth degree, you're probably blocking correctly. You know, uh, George Foreman was a great fighter when he made his comeback. He was fighting this big Swedish guy, and the guy was throwing punches at him. And Foreman didn't have the reflexes anymore. I think he was 50, 45, 50, and he didn't have the reflexes, and he didn't have the physical conditioning, but he was quite tough. And the guy was throwing at him, and he was just, with the gloved hand, he was just swatting the punch away. You take a hand and hold it out and take one finger. You see what I'm saying? You can't. So you could easily swat punches away. So before they teach you that in these martial arts schools, they want you to go there for 5, 6, 7 years. Then all the stuff they taught you is out the window, and they teach you to just go like that. Teach people to go like that because they go broke. If they made you an effective fighter in 6 months, how are they going to make a living? when I first started with Shotokan Karate, it was a nonprofit thing out of Japan, and I was paying, I think, $7 a month. Today, I guess you pay 100, 200 a month, you know. Now, what they did was they taught you how to punch and kick and block, but stupid blocks. Blocks that were not, the way they taught you to block a kick was effective. They called it Gedanbarai, you know. But that was effective. But the the blocking the punches and stuff, it was very ineffective. It was foolish. Um, and it was designed to just build coordination and stuff like that. So, but they did teach you how to punch and kick brutally. They worked on you and worked on you and I mean, it was so bad. And I was, you know, what, 17, I think I was about 17, 18 years old. I would come home. It was in Manhattan. I lived in the Bronx, and I had to go down two big flights of steps from the subway. And I would be so exhausted with their workouts that I would have to hold on to one of the rails in the subway on the side of the steps with two hands and go down because my feet were so wobbly. And this was an hour or so after the class, and my feet were still wobbly from working so hard. You see, they taught us stuff they don't teach anymore. They had you twist your feet on the floor. So if somebody comes over and tries to do a judo, jujitsu throw on you or kick you in the legs or something like that, nothing's going to happen. But you had to learn how to do that right. And the instructors used to come and they would, this big guy, he was about 6 feet, maybe 5'10", a big guy. He used to jump. He was a black belt student. He'd jump on my. He knew I was serious, so he'd jump on my back, hold on to my shoulders, and stand on my feet while I was walking. And you know, I mean, the guy was killing me, you know. But that's the way you learn. So I would come. I mean, I was so wobbly. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself going down the steps. So they teach you how to kick so powerfully and punch that if you kick somebody, you're going to cause damage. Broken ribs, ruptured organs, broken bones. They're going to go flying 3 or 4 feet. They're going to be in bad shape. Okay, you can break their knees, um, break their hands, stomp them. I mean, they really teach you how to do it. But that's not fighting. That's, you know, that it's not balanced because if you come up against a good fighter, he's just going to move out of the way. Took me a long time to figure that out. I made friends with a guy. I worked in a health club, job at a graduate school just to knock around. It was a fun job, you know. And there was a guy there that he was a mob guy. I knew that, but I didn't go tell him, hey, you're in the mob, you know. And he worked for them, and he was a bouncer in one of their nightclubs near the club. And he was a French guy, and I got friendly with him. He was a nice guy. He was a pro fighter in France. You know, like he was on, you know, like going in on the TV. I mean, he wasn't Golden Gloves. He was the real thing. So we talked, and I said, look, how would you fight a karate guy? I mean, so he says, come, I show you. You know, he was, you know. So he says, go ahead, throw a kick. So I threw a kick, and he just kind of moved out of the way a little bit and pushed on it, and said he didn't want to hurt me or anything. He was really a nice guy, or he was to me a nice guy. He might have been a horrible guy to other people, but he really liked me. We just got along. And he said, now it's my turn. And he showed me that I was not prepared, and he was going to move in on me and start punching, you know. And he, you know, talked to him, and he kind of woke me up to this, you know. Then a few years later, I made friends with a guy named Tiger Man Jones. He was, when I knew him in his 50s, in the 1950s, he was on television a lot in Gillette Fight of the Week. Tiger Man Jones. after boxing, he went on to become a chiropractor. And then he became a swindler and went to prison. And he told me he met Jack LaLanne in prison, and Jack LaLanne was being raped by these guys all the time. And he got a hold of Jack LaLanne and taught him how to fight and how to work out and stuff like that. And he, you know, anyway, he broke Archie Moore's jaw once in a fight. This guy, he was good. He was good. He told me one of the reasons he got ahead was he said all the other fighters would drink. They'd run around getting drunk. He says, I didn't do that. He said, I took heroin and cocaine. I'm not kidding. The guy really told me this. He was a champion fighter. I mean, he was on television a lot, And he said, I used to just do heroin and cocaine. He said, I had two women that lived with me. And he said he had a lot of money, and they had a sink, he said, installed in the bedroom. He says you could pull it over the bed, and they would fix my knots for me in the morning and shoot me up. He said I didn't get, they weren't drug testing, and so he was fighting on heroin and cocaine. So he didn't feel the pain, and he had the stimulation. I mean, it's just true. The guy was telling me this. So he said, you know how you could tell a guy really is a fighter or not? And I said, how? And he told me to go like that, and you feel the muscle over here. So I did that, and he got like weird. He says, you got it. He was like, what's going on? And then from there, we talked, and he started telling me things, But, they don't, if you go to like the taekwondo enough, like you become probably a fourth or fifth black belt, you might catch a break and somebody's going to actually teach you how to fight. Okay. But the Army in World War II ran a course teaching people how to fight. It was about a 6-month course, and they made very effective people out of the guys that were, becoming the spies and stuff like that. It was very effective. And there was a guy in the Bronx when I was in high school that was teaching a course like this to the kids. It was 6 months. So if you found a real school and somebody taught this for 6 months, would they be able to fight somebody who went to karate school for 8 or 10 years? They'd win. The guy for 6 months would probably win. Because these guys in the karate school are getting scammed and ripped off by the Satan bot school owners. And they just keep them coming, and they keep teaching them. You see, you don't have to learn how to kick so good that when you kick somebody, they're going to go back 5 feet and have broken bones. I mean, it's effective. It works. So what happens is you're in a position where when you learn these kicks and the blows, if you can deliver a kick on somebody that's trying to hurt you, with all that power, you're going to win the fight because they're not going to recover. Who do you know has muscles on their ribs? Nobody. Who has muscles on their knees? Nobody. How about the groin? Nobody. How about the top of the foot? Nobody. How about the throat? Nobody. So if you really deliver a real powerful kick or a punch, which would be most unlikely that you could ever deliver a good punch because you could break your hand, and it's hard to get that close, So if you're fighting somebody that doesn't know how to fight, you're going to walk away with the fight. If you're fighting somebody that you're probably going to walk away with the fight unless the guy's a very highly accomplished boxer, somebody at the professional level, where they run 10 miles, they hit a heavy bag nonstop for an hour, these kind of people. They have a great sense of timing, and when they deliver a punch, it's very, very powerful, like a karate guy's punch, you know. So these schools just scam the people. That's all. It takes about 6 months to really teach somebody fighting, and if you're in a situation where the governments have collapsed, you definitely don't want to just stay with hand to hand. You want to teach sticks, staff, and knife. You want to teach the weapons, because if you work with a knife and you have just superficial knowledge with it, maybe you studied it for a month and you're using two blades, not one. You never want to fight with one knife. You always want to have two, and you want to have backup hidden on your body. These guys that study 8, 10, 20, 30 years, they can't fight against two knives. Not if you have a little bit of knowledge of what you're doing, because they come at you for one knife, boom, you cut their arm open. You cut the muscles, you can't do it. But you don't want to use a knife like that. You want to use a knife that has a 10 or 12-inch blade, like a Bowie knife or something like that. That's what you want to use. If you have two of those, I don't care if the guy's the highest ranking person in his entire system, over 30,000 people, he's going to go down in seconds. I wouldn't have any trouble just slicing and dicing the guy, because I know what he's going to try to do, and it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And the guy might think he could do it. If he thinks he can do it, what he'll do is he'll stand there and wait for you to attack. So then I just stand there and wait for him to attack. And if nothing happens, it depends what's going on. Is he attacking me, or am I supposed to attack him? For some reason, if I got to attack him, then I've got to feel him out and start faking him out and start taking his limbs out. Okay. So the High Court of Israel ordered the government to explain why it's not launching October 7th inquiries. Because Netanyahu's complicit, as are a lot of the people in his administration, and that's why. What do you think it is? And you see, the Supreme Court and the Attorney General, while they lean left, they protect us against this dog, Netanyahu, who just wants to run the country like a dictator, like Julius Caesar or something like that. If the Abrahamic Accord happens with Saudi Arabia, which it might, because Saudi was at the White House, what was it, yesterday, and it went well, or maybe it was 2 days ago, and it went well. Trump authorized the sale of an unknown amount, well, maybe it's known, I don't know, of F-35s to Saudi Arabia. People in America are concerned that Saudi might show them to China. I don't know why Saudi Arabia would. It would breach the treaty. What is going on is that they need America for the servicing of these things. They need to be serviced. If you're flying them a lot, probably every 6 or 8 weeks, and if America stops servicing them, they're going to fall apart. The only country that got exempted from this, that was enabled to buy the F-35s and do their own servicing, is Israel. Because we modified all the F-35s we got, and we don't want to disclose that to anybody. Although I doubt Netanyahu would not give it to Trump, but you never know. So what you're seeing with the chanting by the synagogue, this is before this guy gets into office. Okay, when he gets into office, he he's going to start telling the police to leave the protesters alone and stop the Jews. This is the way it's going to go. And I don't know what the police department's going to do. I don't know. Now we need to talk about BRICS and the weak US dollar that's declining in value. There's no doubt that the US dollar has dropped in value significantly. Okay, just to run it against the Israeli shekel, it's running $1 is buying about 3.25 Israeli shekels. In the high a few years ago, it was buying 4. The pretty much where it stayed was it was buying 3.75. So it went down. It buys 3. It was buying 3 3/4 shekels. Now it's buying 3 1/4. So it's a pretty serious drop. The euro, I think it's worth about $1.18. The pound sterling worth $1.30 something. I mean, very, very high. They're saying, the investment bankers are saying that the euro, the dollar will be, they're talking next year, which is what, 6 weeks. They're saying it'll be the euro will buy $1.25 when now it's $1.18. Now, what is going on here? You need to understand, and I'm going to explain to you why it stinks for we, the people of the United States. It really stinks. Here you go. When the dollar is cheap, the exporters in America, the people that make things, clothing, books, shoes, anything, I don't know, you name it, whatever it is, they make it, right? And they export it to other countries. They price it in dollars. And the other countries can buy it without having to cough up a lot of their currency. They need less of their currency. So in other words, things be cheap when it's priced in US dollars. You got it? For the foreign countries, from American manufacturing, picks up, gets higher. So the millionaires in America, the Satan bots, own, operate, and control these businesses that are exporting, are making more sales and coming out ahead, making more money. Now, how many of your friends and relatives export? Duh, nobody. Because the Satan bots give no opportunities in business to believers. They and also non-Satan bots. They don't buy from you. They don't do business with you. They consider you the scum of the earth, unreliable, cursed. They won't. You know, so they're the ones that got the money. Claim he brainwashes them to go for the money. The money is just pieces of paper, worthless. So it is a digital currency already, basically worthless. So the dollar's continuing to go down. Okay. One of the big investment houses is talking about gold going over by next year or early next year, something like that. And it's talking about the year after that. But I wouldn't pay attention to them, because if Iran acts up or wars break out or oil problems or this or that, it's oil will just go right up. Gold is staying over 4,000 and silver is staying over 50 an ounce. The BRICS people are stuck in gold. Now, there's things about BRICS that we don't know. Now, you could listen to guys trying to survival supplies on the internet, and they're going to tell you all kinds of noise, but I wouldn't pay attention to them. Okay, so let's talk about BRICS and the de-dollarization and all that. Here's the problems BRICS having. They got 20 something, almost 30 members in it, and they're very reluctant, these member countries, to turn over control of their currency to BRICS and use a BRIC currency. They don't want to do it. So, I mean, you got big players. You got China, you got Russia, you got India, big players in there, okay? And they don't want to turn over using another currency they don't control. So this move to the BRICS new currency, the BRICS dollar, is not it's not going well. They don't know who to trust and why. I mean, they're banking their whole economy on BRICS, and they're scared to do it. India is real scared to do it. They all are. They don't know what to do. Okay? So they're talking about a gold-backed currency. Well, what they're talking about is not a real currency like the dollar for people to use all over the world. Okay? What they're talking about is a settlement currency where if they buy corn from another BRIC member, they use this settlement currency, which they want to make digital. And that might work. They have intentions of backing it with gold. Now, let's look at some of the gold holdings these characters got. The BRICS gold reserve, okay, they have a gold reserve. Now, as far as I know, they have it in a bank in Beijing and a bank in Moscow. Collectively, they have over 6,000 tons. Okay, so let's put this in some kind of perspective. Okay, with a calculator. Okay, you got 6,000 times 2,000 ton 2,000 pounds. So you got 12 million pounds gold. And let's go times 16 for ounces. Just getting the rough deal here. So you have 192 million ounces. And let's multiply that times 4,000 just to get a rough cut. You got $768 billion of gold, almost a trillion, $750 billion of gold. Do you see the threat that BRICS is presenting right now? Do you see it? It's really high. And it's working because the dollar's down. They are taking the demand away. Very few countries have managed to de-dollarize completely, but a lot of them have reduced, especially in BRICS, by settling trade with each other using their local currencies, avoiding the US dollar. And that is part of the reason. They say the ultimate factor that's going to increase the value of the US dollar is insurance rates. Well, yeah, I mean, interest rates, rather. Yeah, that has a bearing. I mean, if the interest rate by the Fed in America went up to 9%, you'd see a lot of people from overseas putting their money in insured bank accounts at 9%. And then when the interest rate dropped, they would go someplace else. So there's people you don't know from this, but there's people, because you're not rich enough, but there are people that are always doing this. They're putting their money in different countries all the time where the interest rates are high. In the local currency, they're putting their money into bonds, from government bonds from different countries and private bonds to get different yields. So these people that got, $800 million and, 11 billion and stuff like that, they're, very often getting returns of, 6 to 15%. Depending how they spread it out. So they're getting richer and richer because they could, they might, after they've been very rich, hundreds of millions of dollars for years and years, they got mansions, they got furniture, they got jewelry, they got planes, yachts, they don't have any major expenditures anymore, and the money keeps rolling in, so they look to invest in more solid investments. And they try to make it so that no matter what happens in the world, they're going to remain very wealthy. They don't read Jeremiah 30, verse 11. They don't believe that's ever going to happen. But they're not going to remain very wealthy at all. They're going to get wiped out. Now, most of this gold is Russia and China. They each own probably over 2,000 tons, 2,300 tons. I had the breakdown. Let me see if I can still have it. Russia has 2,336 tons of gold, while China has 2,298. So they're very close to each other. And the people writing the article are saying that them and the other BRIC countries are building their gold reserves. So this is creating demand for gold and rising the prices. Yes and no. I think that's a lot of that's an alibi, and a lot of it is true as well. It definitely has a factor. But it's so high, I think it's the fear that's doing it. These investment bank people are saying that gold will hit 6,000 an ounce by 2028, and they're saying it'll hit $5,055 by fourth quarter 2026. I think that's not the case. It go up a lot quicker and a lot harder than they understand. So the people in BRICS are in not getting things to move along the way they want it to. If they go to a gold-backed digital currency in BRICS, where do they keep the BRICS money to back this currency. Well, the two big depositories are in Beijing and Russia. Now, these people probably don't want to put their gold in there. It's too important. It's too important. They're not going to risk it. Moscow could easily get overrun, or they could lose their gold. But you see, in the middle of this, you got to understand the dollar is still sinking, and there's a lot of countries that just don't want, and they try to get away from it as much as they can, which weakens America. So America is sitting on a weak dollar right now, and I don't see any signs of it improving. If they raise the interest rate substantially to bring foreign deposits into America, Trump doesn't even publicly talk about what he's doing to help the economy, does he? No. Neither does Netanyahu, but at least Trump talks about some of the stuff. Netanyahu just, yeah, that piece of garbage. Because if he talks about it, he has to come up with a plan to fix it. The food insecurity, the housing prices, and he doesn't want to fix it. He wants it worse, so the Jews leave Israel. He's accomplished stopping the Jews from coming to Israel. Now he wants them to leave. He's with Satan. Look at his behavior. Don't listen to his words. Oh, they call the currency, by the way, a settlement currency. So you buy some cotton from one country in BRICS. They ship you the cotton, and you got to give them, you pay them in BRICS currency. You know, that sort of thing. So the reason we're not seeing the BRICS currency have gone into effect already is the countries are afraid to, where are we going to put our reserves? See, let's say they want to let them back up the settlement currency with corn, plums, orange juice pulp, or whatever, right? Where does this stuff get put? These countries, when they say they got, 200 million tons of orange juice pulp, you got to believe them, but they can't store it. It goes bad. Gold, silver, you could store, but not this other stuff. So it's very tenuous here. I don't know. I don't know. BRICS may never really get too far here. I don't know. There's things they could do. If they do it, they might get ahead, but I'm not seeing any of it. Former President, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, he's no good. Transactional Satan bot. Minister Netanyahu, after the Likud, as well as the Knesset's Haredi parties. Okay, Netanyahu tried to propagate another law into the Knesset that would let the ultra-Orthodox evade the draft, basically. And some of the people in the Knesset said to Netanyahu, well, they spoke to the press, meaning sending Netanyahu a message that they have no intention of letting anything like this pass. So they were saying that the Haredi green light to the Knesset with the latest draft bill, but the right wing is saying that it's an invasion of the draft bill and they're not going to pass it. So the reason the ultra-Orthodox don't break the coalition and pull away from Netanyahu is they have no place to go. Nobody wants them. They're that bad. I think this came from Smotrich here. I think Smotrich just said, let me be clear, in the first cabinet meeting under my leadership, oh no, this is Bennett, under my leadership, we will cancel the despicable anti-Zionist law. Don't lose hope. Better days are still ahead, he added. Ultra-Orthodox, okay. So Bennett is basically telling them that they're not getting it passed. Smotrich is saying we need more people in the military, and we're not passing any of these drafting laws. And so what are they? They're trying to get them to pull from Netanyahu, I think, but they have no place to go, and Netanyahu keeps promising them that they'll get it through and keep trying, and Netanyahu will keep trying because it keeps them in place. So the Haredi are again constantly facing the draft, and the courts are saying to Netanyahu, why aren't you drafting them? And he doesn't want to draft them because then they'll pull away from him. So he's fighting the courts. So then what's his remedy? He wants to strip the power of the courts and fire the attorney general. See, he's a horrible person. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, a religious Zionism party, slams Daigle Haftorah's announcement that the ultra-Orthodox actions rabbinic leaders have given its member Knesset the green light to advance legislation regulating the the draft deal. Okay. So it ain't going anywhere. If they pull from Netanyahu, then it's a piece of cake to get Netanyahu thrown out of office. I vote of no confidence. Because Bezalel and Ben Gvir have at least 15 votes, probably 20, 22, but let's even go 15. The ultra-Orthodox have 15, so that's 30 votes that walked away from Netanyahu others. And you need 61, but Netanyahu had 62, 63, something like that. So he's just out in left field, and then he's got to face his criminal cases. Press releases are not a plan of action. Neither from Daigle, that's the ultra-Orthodox, nor from coalition officials, only a law that changes the current reality and enlists the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, is a law we will pass. The state of Israel needs more soldiers, period. The party says that's it. So they're not getting where Netanyahu is failing to deliver, and they're going to have to deal with their guys getting drafted in wartime, or what is the what? Well, the what's they threaten they're leaving Israel. I think they'll either leave Israel or until these young guys go to jail and clog the courts up. And they'll clog up the well, they'll all start filing appeals saying they have lawyers and they'll just rubber stamp the case that they want to have a day in court and get it scheduled. They'll jam the courts up. They'll jam up the jails, and they'll constantly be filing lawsuits in the prisons for better food, more cell phone privileges, more this, more prayers, more. Oh, they'll want their own prisons segregated from everybody else. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I just don't. They'll try to turn the prisons into not a prison, but just a friendly alternative to not go in the army. You know, where they could sit there and Torah and Talmud teachers will show up every day and teach them, and they'll go to school there and they'll pray there. So it'll be very similar. They'll have conjugal visits. It'll be very similar to their life in the cult. It's crazy. Let me take a look at the live stream. See if I got any questions. Being a Bible believing site, Old and New Testament. Old and New Testament. We'll do some praise. There is no You know, it looks like we got a lot of hecklers in there, which is normal for us. All right, I'm going to talk about what to do when they have a death in the family. I'm not going to talk about what I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bible says. What they do has very little to do with the Bible, some, but not much. Because it might be useful for you one day and to know what they do believe and practice, okay? So I'll go through that. But first, somebody gave me a prayer request, and it's a little difficult to structure. This is the request. Prayers needed to fight against neo-Nazis, hate groups, and Black Israelites targeting young children as young as 10 years old and up. They're using social media, internet, very vulnerable, grooming the young ones, binding and loosing in spiritual warfare prayer. So I think we could structure this, but we have to remember this, okay? We have no place to bring people when we lead them to the Lord. This is a serious deficiency, and I want to give you an example of the opposite of this in the book of Acts, chapter 2. And this tells me that the Lord's not really interested right now in having us do a tremendous amount of evangelism. Most of the people are from the church world, so they've already been exposed to fighting the flesh. So they know you don't go to strip joints, you don't sell heroin, you don't go rob banks, you know, they you don't go fornicate, you don't do, you know, they got that stuff covered. So we them to come out from among them, come out from the churches, the sinful churches, and then they're okay. So I'm going to give you some examples here in Acts 2. We'll go to say Acts 2, verse 40. And with many other words did he testify and exhort, saying, save yourselves from this untoward generation. Then they that gladly received his word were baptized, and the same day there were added unto them about 3,000 souls. Who's going to baptize these people that you're going to lead to the Lord? You understand? We're still in the 2,000 years of Hosea 6, 1 and 2, but we're coming out of it. But we're in recompense, not redemption. Okay? Then they that gladly received his word, oh, I did that already. Now we're in 42. And they continuing steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and in prayers. Okay, so they were all on the same page. They had one true gospel, the apostles' doctrine, not churchianity. And they were in fellowship. They were breaking bread. They were sharing meals together and in fellowship. See, we don't have that today. You understand? We're all separated. Okay. So where are we going to bring people? You're going to lead them to the Lord and say, see you around the campus? And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all that believed were together and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men. Every man had need, for as every man had need. So they sold what they had to meet the needs of the other believers. Does that sound like the church world to you? Heck no. Not even close. Okay. Probably 90% of the people that follow me never give offerings. 85%, 90% never give offerings. Okay? Of any level. Nothing. You see how far away these people are, even though they follow it, they don't walk in it. They academically follow it. They don't bear any good fruit. They just academically follow it. Okay. And they continuing daily with one accord in the temple. So we're going to have a temple again. That's in Ezekiel 37, the last 3 verses. And in one accord, they all had the same gospel. They didn't have, pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, pray in tongues, don't pray in tongues, house church, no house church, blah, 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 blah. They didn't have that. Okay? And breaking bread, they got the laws in place, the law's not in place, the law's done away with. You do Sabbath, you don't do Sabbath. They're divided on just about anything. There was a Baptist minister that used to say that if the rapture came and there was a guy fornicating with a prostitute, he would be removed out of the prostitute and brought up to heaven, because once saved, always saved. There's this moron pastor in Africa. I saw videos what this idiot did. He had the women go to the beach scantily, and he went around and he was kissing them in the derriere. He was exercising his perversions on these congregants of his church. He wasn't, he was saying he was humbling himself. We know what he was doing. They have another one there, a different one that sells the people in the church jars of Vaseline, regular Vaseline, the little plastic jar that, I don't know what it costs, $2, $3, it could be 49 cents, and I don't know what it is today. And he says that he prays over that, and it's a healing Vaseline, and if you got something wrong, you just spread it on, And people buy, he probably sells it to them for $25 or something like that. And then they call him their daddy, and he runs around with bodyguards and very expensive cars in Africa. Stuff like this. Breaking bread from house to house. So you imagine the church, you go to someone's house, and they'll say, well, take off your shoes. Would you go to work in those pants? Yeah, I work. I'm a pipe fitter. I went to church right after work. Well, let me get you something to sit on, and then they put some newspaper down for you to sit on so that you don't get their, couch dirty. This is the kind of thing you get. It's ridiculous. Did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart. They don't have singleness of heart in the church. A house divided against itself shall not stand. Then it's going to go just going to go away very soon. Praising God and having favor with all the people. So the churches have favor with all the people. Come on. And the Lord adding to the congregation, the ecclesia, daily, such as should be saved, adding to them daily. But look what they were doing. They were meeting together, helping each other's needs, breaking bread together, all together. And, they were working in unity. Do you think they were doing binding and loosing together and agreeing in prayer and all? Of course they were agreeing to binding and loosing in prayer. And praising and helping each other and everything else. And the Lord kept adding to them. What's he going to add to? Where are we? Where's he going to bring them? Do you understand? So what do? I put an emphasis on people from the church world. You're not going to really get the Satan people because they're not probably not headed for salvation. They're headed in the delusion until they're dead. Then they'll be out of the delusion and it's too late. But we're not there yet. We don't have, Elijah's not there working. I mean, what do we got? We'd have nowhere to, what are you going to do with them? See what I'm saying? If they get saved and then they go fall back, it could be worse for them than it was before they got saved. The scriptures to that. But what chance do you have to wind up going to a church? Do you understand the problem? This is not an easy thing to deal with. So on a daily basis, I'm putting prayers out that we, God enables us to meet together and come together. Then we do this. And we will, and it will bear fruit. But right now, what do you do with them? Well, I mean, you might meet somebody and be able to fellowship with somebody and help them. And, that could happen. But most of us came out of churchianity, didn't we? Okay. So we have a good grasp of what we're supposed to do. That's why I think I'm teaching the teachers of the future. Because you're used to walking in the true gospel. Now, you're also used to being shunned and rejected by them, but the dads aren't going to be around very long. So you're not going to be rejected at them, they're not going to be there. So how do we structure this prayer? Well, let's see. Do something. And we'll do something now, but what? Let's see. We'll come up with something. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, my Heavenly Father Jehovah, I bind the unclean spirits from being inside and working with and guiding, leading, and directing any and all neo-Nazi groups and Black Israelites, false teachers, and churches. I bind you unclean spirits from bringing inside any people that are members of these organizations. You must depart from them now and not go back into them again ever. And no other unclean spirits can go into these people for 1 year continuously, beginning now, one Bible year, 360 days. And you unclean spirits do not help, guide, lead, assist, give advice to, guidance to, appear to, help in any way, shape, or form any of these groups with their evil work. You shall have nothing to do with them. And I submit all this to you, my Heavenly Father, Jehovah, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, and if you believe it, you can agree with this. Okay? So we need to, get this way. And, I've heard that in years past, Churchianity world talk about unity and, but they try to get you into unity in a false gospel. That's not it. All right. So I want to talk about what do the Jews do when they have a death in the family, because this could be useful for you. Now, in the ancient days, there were various non-Israelites that cremated or burned the bodies. In India, they do it, but we don't do it. Okay, we don't do the cremation. We bury them. Now, they usually would use like a wood casket and put it in the ground, and the Jews don't go have the person's hair done and face makeup and fix their teeth and make them, attractive looking to show everybody them in an open coffin. They don't have that I know of. It's a closed coffin. They don't dress them up with a suit or a pretty dress or anything like that. So the funeral parlors don't say, bring me his best suit or bring me her best dress. And, they don't do any of that. Okay. And they don't bury him with the jewelry. And they use the death shroud, which is a white garment that covers him. Might be an over the head thing or something. It's nothing elaborate. Okay. And there are some that get buried in concrete sarcophaguses on the Mount of Olives, where they have a lot of burial there. And I think they're in a wood coffin inside the concrete one, but maybe not the case. It may not be the case all the time. Maybe they're not. I'm not going to go open them up and look. I'm going to take a break from it and come back and keep going on this path. All right. Okay. So they try to bury the person very quickly, like the next day, really fast. It reduces the mourning time. Well, if the person dies and you go in the funeral parlor and you're dealing with this for, oh, I don't know, many weeks, days, right? It drags it out. A lot of times in America, it's not. It's really very fast. In America, like a day, maybe two. In America, it might be 3 or 4. Okay, and they got to make arrangements, get people ready for the funeral and stuff like that. All right. The funeral is usually held at the cemetery. They might put a tent or a cover up at the Jewish cemetery. Chairs will be there. Type of service. They'll have pallbearers come and carry the casket to the site of the grave. They'll lower it in. They have a thing that lowers it. Don't throw dirt on it. And outside, they'll have the people that work for the cemetery, which frequently would not be Jewish. When the people leave, they'll come and put all the dirt in and bury it. They don't put the tombstone up either a year or 2 years later. They put it up. I don't believe they put it up right away. This is not biblical, any of this stuff, Biblical to bury the dead. So the tombstone usually will have the person's name. It might be in English and Hebrew, or it might be in French and Hebrew, or whatever, depending where they are. And a lot of times they'll have the date of birth and the day of the death. And sometimes they'll say father of, and name the children, husband of, and name the wife. Okay. I think some Jews, I'm not sure if you could do this in an Orthodox Jewish cemetery. I don't think so. I don't think you could put some of these pictures they managed to get on a gravestone of the person in their better days, what they look like. I don't think you can get that in a Jewish cemetery. And the gravestones are not really big, elaborate things. Now, I think if you were going to do cremation, the rabbis wouldn't participate. To get into a Jewish cemetery, a local rabbi or the rabbi in charge of the Jewish cemetery has to know you're Jewish. So if you were active in some cemetery, in some synagogue, the guy in the cemetery, well, the rabbi would probably make the arrangements for you. You know. So if the rabbi green lights it, there's no worries. If there is no rabbi to speak for the person, the rabbi in charge of the cemetery may talk to the family and see if they could establish Jewishness. If not, they won't let them get buried there. You have to go to another cemetery. The Orthodox cemeteries don't let people get buried with a tattoo. The scripture says you should have tattoos, cut marks. It's a tattoo. You shouldn't have tattoos. So they want to cut the tattoo out before they put you in the ground. So they would just cut the skin off. Person's dead. Now, what they do with people now, where they got tattoos of their entire body, I just don't think they would get buried in a Jewish cemetery. They would have to basically skin them. The Bible doesn't tell you you can't get buried with a tattoo. That they made up. The concept of a Jewish cemetery, they made up. Okay. The concept of rabbis deciding who's Jewish and who's not, they made up. Look, by definition, Yeshua said, call no man rabbi. What do? They call themselves rabbi. So are they right? No. Look at the Messianic congregations. How many of them, the leader calls himself rabbi, and if people don't care, they go anyway. Yeshua said not to do it, and they go and do it anyway. People are stupid. You don't understand that. Real believers, I don't think are that stupid, but people in general are. All right. So if a person loses a limb, somebody has to lose a limb. They got infection. The doctors take the limb off. Do they have a rabbi and perform a service? No. They put it in a box and bury it, is my understanding. Now, what else are you going to do with it? Give it to medical school? No, they don't like that. Throw it in the ocean? Leave it to the rabbis to come up with something that they can make revenue off, So that's something most of you would probably not understand or know about, but they do. And that's an Orthodox observant Jewish thing. A lot of people that are not that observant or not that Jewish, if it happened and the limb was in the hospital, the hospital would dispose of it. Whatever the hospital do with it, they wouldn't be concerned. Okay. Now, the Jewish people mourn for 7 days when a family member dies. They call that Sit Shiva. In America, they would say that. I think that Yiddish would be Sheva in Hebrew. Um, so the Bible doesn't explicitly say that thou shalt mourn for 7 days, but we do see numerous instances in the Bible of mourning taking place for 7 days, but there's no commandment in the law to do it. So I guess that's where the rabbis picked it up and they do the 7. Now they get weirdness on this. In the Bible, we read of them sitting on the ground, throwing dirt on their head and on their clothes and ripping their clothes. What they do in modern day is generally they'll wear old clothes, clothes. They'll sit on an uncomfortable wood stool or bench. Okay. The family and the friends come over to the house, not just once, they come 2 to 3 days. Most of the good friends will come 2 days. Some of the family and closer friends will come 3, then it drops off. Now in Israel, they may do it all 7 days. But when they come, they bring things to eat. Treats, special cookies, candies, things like that. Not liquor, special things to eat. Do they serve liquor when they shiver? It might happen, but I don't know. I never knew it to happen. Do the people come over and pray together? Generally not. Do the people coming to visit the ones sitting Shiva wear old clothes and stuff? No, they wear nice clothes. Sometimes the guy sitting Shiva may not shave or something. Do they always take off from work for 7 days? Maybe yes, maybe no. There's no real Bible commandment to do this, so they probably don't. Now, they don't do anything like viewing the body and having the body in the parlor of the house. None of that. Jews don't do that. They have traditions they do that are not in the Bible, not Bible based, that I think are wrong. One of the ones that the American Jews do is they cover the mirrors up in the house when they're sitting Shabbat. Sitting for 7, I mean sitting for 7 to 7 days. Why they do that, I have no idea. Maybe it's you don't see yourself and fix your hair and make yourself. I don't have any idea. Um, do they wear black suits when they go to the funeral? The men, yeah, they do that. That's not in the Bible. They have another tradition when they're back from the funeral. They go to the house, and before they walk in the house, somebody comes and gives them a pitcher of water, and they wash their hands and then go in the house. Is that not at all? When you leave their house after sitting Shiva, well, they might stay in the house for 2 or 3 days and then go out. You know, in New York, they would teach them they have to walk around the block in a certain direction. Is that in the Bible? No. Is that superstitious? Yeah, it's bad. Shouldn't do it. They don't have anything like last rites when they're dying or after they die. There's nothing like that. Um, when there's the bad death, or like sudden death, not like somebody was sick for a year or 6 months and they knew it was going to happen, they just didn't know when. But some kind of a sudden death. The friends and the family will often stay with them 24/7 for a few days as needed until they get grip of themselves. War, accidents, you get a sudden event, a heart attack or something, things like that. They stay with the people all the time. I knew one where it was a kibbutz years and years ago. This kid, both his parents got in a car accident and died. So the kibbutz, of course, adopted him. Somebody in the kibbutz finished raising him. The kid was probably 13, 12, 13, 14, something like that. And they had people staying with the kid constantly, night and day. Days of this. In a case like that, it's quite extreme. So there would be many days of that to give the kid a chance to very easily slip into adjusting to what happened. Is that in the Bible? No, but comforting somebody during a time of need is, of course, quite biblical. So that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not demonic. It's not superstition. It's a good deed. And I never talked about this stuff with you guys, but I'm not a super expert on it, but this is what I know about it. Okay. Now they have moronic stuff associated with it, like the rabbis teach if you get buried away from Jerusalem, when you get redemption, you're going to have to crawl back to Jerusalem under the earth. They teach this. So that's why the Mount of Olives grave sites cost a lot of money. They get buried a third of a mile from the temple area, so they can't bury him at the temple, so there's about as close as they can. So I guess they believe you'll just walk up out of your coffin and, go to the temple or something like that. If you were buried 300 years ago, I don't think your death shroud is going to be in any good condition anymore. What are you going to wear? We're going to have a nudist colony or something? No. God might provide. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, and we'll find out. So if you're rich, you're probably a Satan bot. You could get buried over there. I think some of these Jews that actually are also Satan bots, but not in the open sense. They do witchcraft, sorcery, spells, enchantments, but probably still think they're Jewish. They probably think they're going to be saved because they follow the law. They eat kosher and they do Shabbat and stuff like that. It's that bad. Will God have mercy on them? I don't know. He says, go, have your idols or something, worship your idols. And when the time comes and I whistle for you, see if you come. So he has to bring them out of it, but an idol doesn't necessarily mean they're worshiping the devil. And, maybe, I don't know, because the demons are idols. They're not gods. Well, I think I covered what I know about that stuff. Okay. If you want to know about bat mitzvah, I'll tell you that. It's quick. Bat mitzvah is for a girl. There's no such thing, I don't think. They made it up. It's good for business. Rabbis get money. The boys, the bar mitzvah is when they say the boy comes of age, which the rabbis say is 13. They have like a ceremony to celebrate his coming of age. They usually do it at 12. The rabbi, using whatever wisdom the goofball has, which is probably pretty much next to nothing, or I don't know, they give you a passage in the scripture, maybe 5 or 10 lines that you're going to recite at your bar mitzvah. So they call you up and you get up there and you recite that, you read it, they give it to you, you read it in Hebrew, they teach you how to read Hebrew, and you recite it, and then the rabbi might have you stand up at the podium while the next kid reads another passage, which is probably not in sequence, is someplace else the rabbi picked up. So you might see 3, 4, or 5 kids get bar mitzvah at the same time. So the rabbi may do this a few times a year. Okay. The age of the people and so forth. And then they usually have some sort of a celebration in the synagogue when it's all over. They do it on Saturday in the morning. And this is a really big day for these kids. So there's something going on in the synagogue, but it's lightweight, and it's for all the 4, 5, 6, or 3 kids that got bar mitzvah that day. There's a lot of people in the synagogue you don't know, and there's people you do know, and this and that. And then what happens? Well, then you go home. And then you go to the catering place. What does that mean? The catering place is a place where you would have weddings and bar mitzvahs. maybe you would have a sweet 16 party for a girl, which has nothing to do with the Bible. Or you would have an engagement. I think I said that, an engagement party. Or you might want to have a big party to celebrate the circumcision of a baby boy or to celebrate the birth of a child or anything. It's not biblical. You want to go have a party, go have a party. And they use these banquet halls, you'd call them. They have a kitchen, and you go there and you negotiate what kind of food you want. You can get served meals, you could get a buffet, you could get a combination. And then you hire a band, and you could have music. And these places usually could hold up to perhaps 200 people. They have all different sizes, of course, right? All right, so you go to the bar mitzvah. Usually that's after the thing in the synagogue. It's probably going to be 4:30, 5:30 in the evening, not late. And it'll be a dinner meal, the supper meal. And you go there and you have seating. They have tables usually with 8 or 10 or 12 people, a bunch of those. And I guess there was about 60, 70 people in my bar mitzvah, 50, 67, something like that. And you sit at the big table, get a lot of attention. Everybody's coming over and congratulating you. And they give you presents. Presents could be all kinds of things. Okay. A bond. Someplace I think I still have. No, it's something else. A lot of times they give them an Israeli bond. They go to one of the Israel banks in America, in New York, and they buy an Israeli bond and they give it to the kid. I was bought with it. I don't know. I can't remember. They're not high, $10 to $25 bond, probably. Okay. Then one of the big things they did is, remember back when I was doing this, silver dollars were in circulation. You had them in your pocket. You went to stores, you paid for them. You go to the bank and you'd say, here's $20. Could I have 20 silver dollars? And they'd give you 20 silver dollars. They were worth $1, not $50 like today. So $1 worth $50 today, so you could get an idea what real inflation looks like, right? Gold back then was $35, and now it's over 4,000. So you could get a good idea what inflation looked like. Back in those days, a Cadillac convertible, like a Coupe de Ville convertible, was about $42,000. If you went to a high-end Cadillac today, you'd spend what, $120,000, $130,000. You get the idea yet? A Corvette was also about 42, 4,400, 4,000 back then. Today, Corvettes are over 100,000. So that's your real inflation if you're looking for it. Okay. Anyway, people gave you a shirt, maybe different things. Some people gave you cash, not silver dollars, currency. So you would be by this time overtired. You wouldn't leave the banquet place probably till 8, 9 o'clock at night. You have to wait till guests will go home. And then you went into the office with the guy that owned the place and you settled with him, you gave him a check. Your parents, You didn't, I don't remember taking the food home. Or they had a buffet, a smallish buffet, maybe 6 feet, for appetizers before the meal. Then they had, I don't know, prime rib or pot roast or something, and the main meal with vegetables and dessert. I can't remember everything like that. And dancing, they would do the bunny hop and the different kinds of dances. Some people would do the Russian thing where they'd squat down and shoot the leg out. because most of the family was from Russia, or Poland near Russia. Uh, and that's it. And people would eat the meal, they hang around. They had a bar, people would drink. We were kids, we didn't drink. And they would go home, and then you would go home. And then I remember my mother said, "Come, let's count the loot," you know. And she was counting how much money I got, you know. And then what happened? Then you go to sleep. I mean, you go home, you're tired, you're exhausted, you know, go to sleep. And then what happens is you're going to bar mitzvahs for friends and relatives. With your friends, you're all kind of getting bar mitzvahed within the same year. So you're going to a lot of bar mitzvahs. You get kind of burned out on them, but you're going to a lot of them. And you just, you know, you go and you do the best you can. You know, you go, you got to give them presents and stuff like that. And that's what it's like. So it's a big thing. Now, the girls got jealous, and the rabbis figured, hey, let's do bat mitzvahs. We can make money. So I'm looking at that. There's no basis for this, so they did the bat mitzvah, which was a bar mitzvah for the girl, a very similar way, where they read passage in synagogue, I guess. I never went to a bat mitzvah because we used an Orthodox synagogue and they didn't do them. I don't think the Orthodox would. I think the Reform and conservative rabbis do it, not the Orthodox. So, and then there's a lot of different ones, but you got Reform, conservative, Orthodox, and ultra Orthodox. The Orthodox and the ultra Orthodox, I don't believe practice bat mitzvah at all. So what the Jewish girls have is they would have a sweet 16, which has nothing to do with the rabbis or the religion. They would just have a party when they were 16, usually without the boys, with the girls or something. I don't remember. I don't think I ever went to a sweet 16. Already, because I skipped a year, so I never went to one that I can recall anyway. So that was the sweet 16 stuff, and don't know much more than that. That had nothing to do with the religion. Did I know any girls that got bat mitzvah? No, because the synagogues in the neighborhood that I grew up in were all Orthodox synagogues, not ultra Orthodox, Orthodox. So we don't. They didn't have any conservative or reform synagogues there, so I never had any experience with that. I know it went on, and I ran into girls that had it, you know, later on in life, in college and stuff, but I never knew much about it. I remember as a child, the Lord must have been working with me because I would go to my mother and make fun of the synagogues. I'd say, you know, yeah, you see, the rabbis sell seats for the high holidays, like Yom Kippur is a high holiday, the go up holidays, you know, and I think they add to it also. So if you want to sit in front of the synagogue, you got to pay more for your seat. That helps the synagogue function. Okay, I'll tell you how they used to do it today, but back then they would sell seats and the people would buy the seats. What did they cost? I have no idea. I have no idea. And the wealthier ones would sit up at the front and, you know, this and that. So I used to make fun of them. I was, you know, a young kid, maybe 14, and I'd say, oh, you know, come buy a seat, you sit up in the front, have a holy seat. I used to make fun of the rabbis, and I was, you know, I never stepped foot in a synagogue after the bar mitzvah things were over. I didn't step foot for about 7 years. And I was with an uncle of mine in California, and he had me go to a wedding, somebody in their community. I went to the wedding, and I had to go to the synagogue. So I was very rude if I didn't do it, and I did it. And then I don't think I went to a synagogue again for a long, long time after that. So that's what I got so tired of them, so burned out on them. I didn't have anything to do with them. They weren't not, most of the rabbis were not nice to kids. They weren't nice to kids. No. Our rabbi owned the synagogue, and then he had a laundromat next door that he owned. So he was getting cash off the books, probably. I I didn't know what to do with it. I was not a nice guy. His wife was very nice. She used to work there. She was extremely nice, and his son was there, and the son was pretty detached. He wore dark suits, and he usually wore a fedora hat and had a kippah underneath it. Or maybe he didn't have the kippah, maybe he just had the hat on. I can't recall. And I don't remember seeing tzitzit, but they conceal them, so I don't know. Maybe he had them, and I don't remember. Um, I have no idea. Can't recall. I don't know. How to do the tzvillin, they call it late tzvillin, which are the blocks made out of leather with the leather straps, and they had talits, got all the big prayer shawl. That's not biblical. They never had that. You don't wear a prayer shawl. Your wallet sits it on your garment, all your all the time garment. It's all messed up. You know what they do. That since it was on all the extreme borders of your clothing everywhere, over, not just four hanging off the belt or something. They're all ridiculous. Um, I think they smoked in the synagogue. I'm not sure. I think they did back then. Not positive, but I think they did. When you went in the synagogue, they had a box of yarmulkes, skull caps, kippahs, yarmulke, skull cap. And when you went in, you picked one out of a box. I mean, a big box, very sanitary. So if you wanted to get your own, you could buy your own. In some of the neighborhoods, they had uh, a Judaica store. What's a Judaica store? Well, in my neighborhood, the rabbis took the Judaica store on themselves. So if you want to buy a Hanukkah menorah, which is an 8 station or 8 candle menorah, you go to the Judaica store and you can buy one. They had all different kinds of them: brass, stainless steel. If you were rich, you probably had gold and silver ones and whatever, big ones, little ones. Okay. You could buy to buy your door. You could buy Jewish stars, the Chai symbol. What else could you buy? What else? What else? Books, prayer books, Talmud. Uh, Torah, Talmud. I don't remember. Probably sold Kabbalah. I don't know. I didn't know what Kabbalah was. They sold. They sold the yarmulkes. They sold the tzitzit. It's villain. What else? Pictures, decorations. You could put around your house. else did they sell? About it, I guess. Candles for Hanukkah, different kinds of candles. Then they sell candy for Hanukkah, which would be chocolate made to look like wrapped in gold aluminum foil. Dreidels for the holidays where you spin it, the grog, the noisemaker for hanging. Oh, they had different things they sold. The rabbis would sell these things at the synagogue, so they weren't supporting any store in the neighborhood where I was, but other neighborhoods had them. So it would vary, they just it changed, and they have those stores in Israel. I know near me here, there's two of them. They're very friendly. I've gone in there and bought, like, some stuff, tzitzit things, and yeah, they're very friendly. They wear the tzitzit, because it says the four corners, they got it goofed up, of course, but they have a thing you put over your head. It has a hole for your neck, and it has a thing that comes down in the front. It's squared off, and a thing comes down in the back. It's squared off. Most of them have no sides, and it has of the tassels on the thing, one in each corner, with blue and white or all white sometimes. And I bought a few of those, but I realized I'm not doing it the right way. What else did I sell there? Different things, I guess. Tefillin could cost a fortune. If you want to get they call it kosher tefillin, some rabbi, a high-ranking rabbi, blesses the tefillin and supervises the making of it, could be $3,000. Really. I don't believe there's really ever had tefillin. They did wear it at the time of Yeshua, but I don't think it was intended to be done that way, but they did wear it. And they wore them all the time. They wrapped the thing around the head with the block in the head, and then I think it's the left arm, they wrap it around and the blocks over here or something. We as kids used to fool around with them and call them bolos, so you could throw them or something. We would, most of the kids that I knew that were getting bar mitzvah and went to the Hebrew school after school, they didn't take it seriously. Maybe there was some that did, but I didn't know any. None of the kids I knew and grew up with ever became religious, Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox Jews. I never knew one of the kids to do that, not a single one. But they did, in other places in Brooklyn where you had more serious Orthodox kids, they did. And we had some in the neighborhood Orthodox. It varies, guy. It's somebody was keeping the synagogues in business. There was three of them in the neighborhood. Let's see, three. Yeah. And for tabernacles, they would build the tabernacle on the roof of the synagogue. And people would go up there to have a meal or a party or whatever. I don't know if they did. I never went, but they put them up on the roof. So the rabbis were not that tight with the community. I mean, not in the Bronx. I mean, they weren't. Now, I know in other parts of the country, the rabbis were very friendly, and they'd get to know the families and visit the families, and the rabbis take courses at universities and counseling, and instead of reading the Bible and going by the Bible and having the Holy Spirit, they go to a university and study counseling, that kind of thing. But the ones that we had back then, and we're talking the early 60s, late 50s, they didn't have any of that. I don't ever remember the rabbi coming in the house. I think maybe never, maybe once. I don't remember. My grandmother used to go, I think, to some of the High Holy Day services, not the same synagogue I was bar mitzvahed in. Another one was 3-4 blocks away. Did my grandfather go with her? Good question. Don't know. I think so. They also on what is it? Yom Kippur. I think it's Yom Kippur. They go to the synagogues and pray, and they have a tradition that's not biblically based of wearing soft shoes. What they would buy is Keds. They were white and they had 5 eyelets with laces, if you know what I'm talking. They weren't very big, sturdy sneakers. They weren't like basketball sneakers. They weren't like Converse low or high top. But, they call them a tennis shoe. It wasn't really a tennis shoe, but that's what the name was. They were cheap. Back then, they were probably $4 or $5, $6. I don't know, something like that. Converse were, I don't know, $8 or $9 tops. That was the sneaker of sneakers was the Converse, the high top. They were cold in the winter. Them suckers didn't keep you warm. Let me tell you, they were cold. In the winter, you didn't want to be wearing those. And they would get wet in the rain or the snow, you didn't run around with those. Boots weren't that good back then. Your best bet for shoes was the big classical shoe with the big thick, for men, a thick with the round piping at the seam. And I used to take them and put a few layers of the waxy shoe polish on them. Now, for the summer, they were no good. But in the spring or the fall, before the snow came, they would help a lot in the rain because the water would beat up and roll off it with all the shoe polish. The sole was real thick, and it stayed reasonably dry. We didn't have all the advances, They didn't have Gore-Tex clothes. You were out in the snow, your clothes got wet. What you could do was, other than carry an umbrella, is get these rubber raincoats. They sold them for $1 or $2 in a little bag. You could carry that around with you, and if you got caught in the rain, you took your raincoat out and you put it over your clothes. It came down below your knees, and it would keep you quite dry, very, very. But it would get sweaty if it was warm out. So that was how you protected that. And then when the weather was worse, you get rubbers, which was a rubber overshoe you put over your shoes, and that would help you unless the water was deep. Now, in New York, when you stepped off the curbs, a lot of times when you had snow, the water would back up because the sewers were full of dirt. And when you stepped off the curb, you'd have water. So you'd have to jump from the curb all the way into the middle of the street to clear the puddle, which was by the curb, or the rubbers wouldn't do it. You'd have to get galoshes, which is an overshoe, about a boot height, like 9-10 inches up. And they had different kinds you could get, insulated and non-insulated, and they were waterproof. And when you had those on, you just walked in the water. It didn't have any effect on you. You'd get cold because the water was cold, but that was it. So that's what you had to wear. And then when you got into school or your office or wherever, you didn't want to wear those because they'd be so hot and uncomfortable. You'd take them off, and then when you went home, you put them back on. That's how we had to live. And I used to have to walk to high school. more than a half a mile, but probably not a mile. And when it's, 5 degrees above 0 Fahrenheit, it was a miserable walk. My ears used to get so numb. I would go into the school, and when I started thawing out, they would hurt. They really hurt. They were like burning pain. It was, and then your toes and your hands would be numb from being outside so long. We had gloves, but we didn't have good gloves. If you had leather gloves and you'd be throwing snowballs in the winter, your leather gloves would turn into junk pretty quick. You had wool gloves and they would get wet. We didn't have any waterproof gloves. For hats, we had wool hats, watch caps. They could get wet, but they were good ones. They were navy, surplus, all virgin wool, and not like today. They were pretty good. That's what all the kids had. All the same color, dark blue. And we had heavy wool coats usually, and they could get wet too. But and your pants were wool pants, corduroy. It was a miserable winter. I don't know why my parents ever decided they wanted to stay there, but they did. I couldn't stand the place. I got out of there at an early age. The weather was just so bad, I couldn't take it. 80% of the winter there is cloudy and overcast. You don't see the sun 80% of the time. The winter starts like in November and it's over in March. So it's a long time you don't see sun. It's terrible. And then when you get into spring, everybody's so happy, not miserable anymore. But why not just live someplace where you're not miserable half the year? That's what I did. San Francisco for me was the first years I lived there. I loved it because I was used to New York. And you really don't get snow or ice or sleet or hail or slush there. I mean, every few years you get a quarter of an inch of snow, which is gone in a matter of hours. It's very rare. So, but it gets cold at night. You wouldn't get below 32, but you'd have 40 degrees with a strong, damp wind, and rain, driving rain. And it gets cold and uncomfortable, but not that bad, but enough. And you don't get warm weather there. So you're always wearing a coat just about, that. Then I moved to another part near the airport where it was way, way warmer. And I liked that a lot better. But I lived there 3 years, but the problem was I kept driving back and forth to San Francisco because there was nothing to do down there. It was boring. So I got tired of moving back and forth to San Francisco, so I moved back to San Francisco. And then it was really bad. That was when there was a big exodus of people coming into San Francisco. It was getting the reputation for the gay mecca of the world. So everything got bad there. So then I moved to Marin County, and that was the best. But it was dangerous. I lived in a house by myself with a 3-story house overlooking the bay. And people tried to break into the house when I was home alone. So I didn't have any dogs. I had cats. They're not going to do anything. So I had to walk around. I had people working in the business there. And then at night I was by myself. I had an alarm on. So a lot of times when I was by myself at night, I would lock the house up if it was cool and put the alarm on. And so if anyone broke in, the alarm would get off. So at least I'd get help in 90 seconds. But I used to be my own help. I carried a pistol around the house with me, and I had a shotgun up in the bedroom. And that was it. If anybody came in, they were going to probably die. But I had attempts, you know. So, I mean, if I was a woman alone there, or let's say I was married then, which I wasn't, and I had a wife there with a kid at night, I mean, it was dangerous, People could break in. So that was Sausalito. It had a very bad crime rate. Very bad. very bad. But I enjoyed living there. The weather was great. So anyway, that's the Jews and the funerals and the death and what they do. So if you got a lot of money, you get yourself buried at the Mount of Olives. I don't know what it costs today. It probably is 25, 50, $100,000 to get buried there. Decades ago, like 30, 40 years ago, it was $5,000. So I have no idea what it costs, but it's a lot of money. So that's Satan's symptoms, you know. If you got a lot of money, everything's better for you. You know, that's the way that idiot functions, right? Okay, let's see if we got any questions going on here. Is this thing not working? No, it appears to be working. No, I think it's running. All right, so I'll do a prayer for all of us, and we can agree. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, my heavenly Father Jehovah, I pray for me and my wife and all the true believers and their household. I pray that we would all have your peace, safety, protection, and be happy, healthy, and whole. And the same for our animals and pets. And I pray that we have no accidents, no tickets, no breakdowns, no getting stopped, stuck, or stranded with any car or vehicle or mode of transportation. I pray we don't get swindled, gypped, have things stolen, damaged, broken, lost, destroyed. I pray for your healing and recuperative power to flow through us, that we don't get sick, ill, or hurt, and we keep healing up every day. And I pray we have strength, stamina, and endurance. And I pray for the things all the time for us. And I pray that the unclean spirits are unable to surveillance us or know our communications, either in person or over the internet or over the telephone. They have no knowledge of these things. They cannot surveillance us, follow us, or track us using people, unclean spirits, or anything at their disposal. They can't do it. They can't see us in our house, and they don't know what we're doing. They can't observe or surveillance our vehicles or our animals and pets either. And I pray you would help us when we need to buy things or sell things, that we do well in these endeavors. I pray we have adequate finances and then some left over. I pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We'll sleep well, and our sleep would be sweet, and we would wake up at a good time, and we have no nightmares or disrupting or uncomfortable dreams, and we don't get any dreams or visions from unclean spirits or those people serving them, and the darts of the enemy have no effect on us, and we don't get any thoughts, ideas, notions, feelings, hunches from unclean spirits or people that serve unclean spirits. And I pray any and all witchcraft, sorcery, curses, hexes, vexes, spells, enchantments aimed, directed at targeting us, our households, or anything we own, possess, control, set our hand to, is null and void for all time, shall never return. And I pray that any problems that the unclean spirits and people serving the unclean spirits have put in our life, that you would remove those from us, my heavenly Father Jehovah, and they would not be bothering us anymore. I pray you would deal with our enemies that bother us in a way that they won't want to bother us anymore. And I pray that I can do better videos, more enlightening videos, better Bible teaching, get more prayers answered. And I pray I pray all this to you, my Heavenly Father, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, and you can agree with that. And I think that's making these prayers are making all our lives better. Now, you can agree with this even when it's a video. And I also pray, my Heavenly Father, Jehovah, that we would be able to meet together in the flesh as soon as possible. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, and you can agree with that. If you want to do your spiritual warfare, by all means, do it. I'm to a close. When you read my telegram, you see the fires every day. It's all year. It's still getting fires every day where I'm putting them up. And we're not picking up every fire. We're getting some of them. I'm sure not all of them. It's still getting up there. And the daughter of Babylon, the beast with the 10, the 10 horns, the 10 kings. The beast is apparently getting frustrated with Trump because Trump's not delivering, and they're going to get rid of Trump and America. And that's coming. We keep getting signs that it's well on the way. We're never going to know exactly the day or the hour till it happens. Then we'll know. When it happens, we'll know. But probably not till then. But it's going to probably come unexpected. Now I think it's going to take a long time. We got to have this, that, and the other thing first. But it could happen just boom, The siege will do it. And the siege is pretty close. And the siege could happen in days. Zechariah 12 siege. It could happen in days. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take a long time. It could come in days. It's close to being there now. I don't know what's going to happen with this moron Netanyahu. Eventually, he's got to slip and fall. You can't hang on forever. All right. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, my Heavenly Father, I submit this binding to you. I bind all the unclean spirits from remaining inside any person that owns, operates, controls, or works for the government of Israel, or someone that works in the White House and the Pentagon and the CIA and the NSA. And I bind you unclean spirits from remaining in any of these people. You must depart from them and return unto them again. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. And you can agree with that if you like. We'll keep them off guard. Okay, kids, so I say my shalom to my Shabbat shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. And I'm out. And I went over 3 hours. That's too long. Okay, guys, thanks. Shabbat shalom to all the true believers, and I'm out.